Good afternoon. It is 12 o'clock here on the East Coast. Welcome to the Dorman Lunch and Learn once again. And why we did the diagnosis that way, part one. At some other point, I'll do other parts. Got loads of case studies. My name is G. Trulia. I'll be your instructor. As we go through, you could ask any questions. Type them in the chat and I'll respond. I will ask for feedback, because this is a little bit different than what we've done before, okay? So we'll be on about an hour or so. What took us down that path? You know, you got to know, hey, why did you go down that path? Not this is a problem vehicle and here's just we fix it, okay? I want you to think of how we did it and why I did it that way or my guys did it that way. We're going to talk about information, tools and equipment, okay, case studies, and more. All very, very important things to go through. Now let's go through case study number one. Here, backstory on this vehicle, the Honda came in with a dead battery and it had already been replaced. So the question I have for you, where do you start your diagnosis? What tools do you take out? What information source do you look at? Well, let's dig into that a little bit. First of all, on a Honda, what is the right parasitic draw? Well, it's hard for you to know that, but if you are TFI, read the freaking information, you'll go in and most Hondas are about 35 milliamp draw. Anything higher than 35 milliamp will be considered a parasitic draw, okay? Now, what tools are we going to use? I don't like taking the backhoe out if the shovel will do the job, right? Well, one of the things we use here that I find very, very important is a I-30S. That is a fluke amp clamp that can read down to 30 right on the nose with no drift milliamps and go down way down to near 0 milliamps with some drift, about 2 or 3 milliamp drift. That gives me plenty of room to do a Volvo at 15 milliamp and every other vehicle out there. It's pretty much dead accurate. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use my fluke meter. You could use a lab scope, but that's kind of taking the backhoe out when the shovel will do it, right? But that's up to you. If you want to graph it over time, you could take it out and do it. The other thing I'm going to do is take my thermal imager out. Why? Well, for parasitic draw, your best bet is to see what is lighting up. And here's what we do. We bring the vehicle in the bay. The bay is cool. It's left overnight. All the doors tripped open. Trunk open. Glove box open. Anything with a light, hood open. That way, when we have the thermal imager, the first place I start is guess where? Take a guess where I would start first. Remember, I said hood open. I'm going to look under the hood and check the alternator out, because alternator diodes could be a big issue. And with a thermal imager, we would see that, correct? So that's my first place. Then I look all around the vehicle. Here, using the thermal imager on this Odyssey, what we found was the right rear door, and this thing was pulling over 2 point something amps, okay? When I went to the right door, which is a high failure rate, I want you to write that down, high failure rate, the door motor, which is used a lot, okay? You do have to worry, by the way, if the left side door is bad, the people driving may have to be reported to CPS, you know what I mean? Why are they letting their kids out in traffic? So it's usually the right side door is used a lot more than the left, you know what I'm saying? So we look at it, we find the motor is lit up like a Christmas tree, and that's not what you're seeing behind me. What I want you to look at, Doreen will switch to that slide in a second. What I want you to look at is what we found after we disconnected the motor. So here we disconnect the motor. Look at our thermal imager right here lighting up, but look how much current is still being drawn. 146 milliamps. If 35 is the spec, that is over, and it's going to kill this battery, isn't it? It's going to cause a big problem. So why did I use that little amp clamp? Well, I left the other one up front, the i30S. We seen it drop, but it didn't go all the way down. And it had a little more than this one had here. But when I seen the thermal imager light up behind where the window would be, I had to close the door now, get the door out of my way. And I seen this light up, I'm like, hold it, what the hey else is going to be in there behind that panel? And basically what's behind that panel is a computer. This computer, and it's very odd that computers do it. Now, we did have one years back. In fact, Doreen had bought a brand new Chevy Impala, I don't know, back in the early 2000s, I think. And make a long story short, well, of course, it went back to the dealer because Doreen's battery went dead. They couldn't figure it out, and this dealer was a little far away. My buddy had a Chevy dealer right here in town at the time. And I looked at it and I said to Drew and Norm, his brother, who was service manager, hey, I see that the BCM is the problem, okay? Now, without disconnecting anything, they said, well, we got to check it, G. We believe you. We'll check that first. And sure as hell, the BCM was bad. But most of the time, we don't see computers staying on, causing that type of draw. So once I seen that this was on, I decided to go back here where all the wires are going to the computer and go around the wire that I found in the wiring diagram, using Pro Demand, and find that wire and see what the draw is. So that is why I went this way, and we put a new motor in and a new module, and of course there was no drawer and it's fixed. So that's why we decided to go that route on this. Let's take a look at something totally different here in case study number 2. Okay. Now this vehicle came in, Grand Cherokee, 3.6, 87,000 or so on the clock, from another shop, actually came from Repair Pal, okay, Repair Pal shop, and happened to be one of my students, probably about 30 miles north of here, okay, and they couldn't find the problem. I spoke to my student named Fred, and he said, hey, the misfire, we tried coils, we tried plugs, blah, 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 blah. Make a long story short, they couldn't find it. Well, when the people brought it here, we decided, what's my first step of action? Remember, your brain, your eyes, your ears, your nose, your hands, all very important tools, right? You can look, you can see. Yeah, you can tell the motor wasn't running great, but I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. So what's your first step when you're going to be diagnosing this vehicle? What do we want to start with on this vehicle? Type it in there. And I'm going to take a peek here. So in thermal images are great, but what do we want to start here? Okay, listen. Anyone else want to type something in there?
Relative compression.
Good. Relative compression. Very, very important to look at. But how about before that? How about before that relative compression? And that's good. And what was that gentleman's name? I don't know who DP is. Oh, Don. Hey, Don. Okay. Battery. I like that. So whoever, Michael Catawba. Excellent, Michael. Well, he's probably coming to the big event already.
He is.
So, Michael Catawba, battery. And what would the battery voltage expected to be on this vehicle if it's good? 12.6, a regular lead acid. If it's an EFB or a AGM, somewhere 12.8 to 13 volts, okay? So we need that for a good relative compression. If we don't have it for a good relative compression, well, the test is not going to be accurate. And you don't put a jumper pack on it. You would need to charge the battery up first, take the charger off, make sure you had good voltage, and then perform relative compression. So we look at this thing here, and we perform relative compression right here. We are syncing it. This is synced. That's how we have our fire in order in the back. and basically it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But you can see we counted here. What do we see? Cylinder number 6 is a problem. When you're looking at this and you're going, AC voltage, because notice we are not using an amp clamp, okay? So we're using the E-scope here. We're doing a start deep record, pretty easy to do. Our red and black lead is at the battery. The scope is coupled to AC voltage. And what you're doing is looking at the heights of these. Are they all the same? Well, they look pretty close, but you see this one? It's down. It's the odd man out. You do get some residual here because you see how this went up a little bit more than that? But look at the spacing between them. Aren't they all even except for this? So we know number 6 cylinder is a problem. We go in, excuse me, and we perform a regular dry compression test. We take the plug out in number 6, because remember, relative compression doesn't really tell you how much pressure is in it, but is there a difference between one cylinder and another cylinder? And in this case, sure as hey there is, right? We take it out, we put the compression gauge in there, we think we're going to see a problem. We look at the specification, we get 1, 2, 3, 4 bounces of the needle. First bounce, 50% of the total. It looks good. It didn't do anything. We ran it twice, okay? The next thing we did is said, hey, there's a problem in this cylinder, so let's do a cylinder leak down test. I want you to look at these gauges. This puts 100% air into the cylinder. This would be the leakage. What is the maximum amount of leakage? It has some. And again, we're set to top dead center of that cylinder. As I take a sip of water, tell me what the maximum amount of leakage would be there. And Mike Catawba, since you got that right answer on that other one, if you want to take someone to the big event and you know they'd come, we can give you a ticket. We just need their name. So that's what the rest of you could win, not because I know Mike Catawba. Has nothing to do with that. He had the right answer. Don, you had partial answer. Okay, so I'm looking here to see what we're saying as the maximum leakage. Okay, spec, well, spec is 15%, 10% is fine, okay? So write that down. When you get 15% difference, that's where you got to jump. No real difference, right? So what's your next step? Now, if you open your handout up, you know what the next step is going to be. What is a scope when it comes to engine stuff? It is the MRI into the mechanical system. Gauges could only do so much, right? And if any of you use a vacuum pressure transducer, you would notice, like some Asian motors you go on, vacuum needles barely move. And if you wanted to see crank and vacuum, you would use a vacuum transducer to see the little humps of 1 to 3 inches of vacuum, because it magnifies it. It's like taking that magnifying glass out and actually doing it. Well, our next step, is taking the regular compression hose out, taking the Schrader valve out of it, or just reaching in and getting our pressure transducer hose that has no Schrader. That way we can get a good reading. And I want you to look at this. What you're looking at is cranking compression. And cranking compression is for what? And then I want to also an answer. Cranking compression is for watt of the engine, and running compression is for watt of the engine. If you get that right, I think I may give you a ticket to the big event, okay? So here, when you look at this, we're as low as about 130 and as high as like 145 or so. But notice we're up and down. Notice you have something going on there where compression is not even across the top. I want you to write this down. Very, very important when you do this test. And again, all we did was go into deep record right up here. And you hit that as you're cranking the motor over. You basically stop it. And then what you do when you stop it, you go right here to a zoom window. You cut a little piece, go little itsy bitsy piece, and it blows up. Okay. You've probably seen Bernie do it or us do it during a webinar at some point. When you do that, this is what you'd get. So there's no worry about, oh, I got to set the time and the voltage or whatever. You're just getting a reading. And this basically is telling me, we definitely confirm what relative compression is telling me. There is a problem. But the compression gauge is not telling me that. And, you know, we found the same problem I want you to write down. I don't have it in this particular setup here. But we found the same thing on the Hemi motors, the 5.7s, those motors with the MDS, multi-displacement system. They have the same exact MO, meaning relative compression on those doesn't even show up bad. Here at least showed up bad, okay? It doesn't show compression wet or dry bad, just like here, and it doesn't show cylinder leak down, okay? But watch where we're going. Okay, did I get any answers on that?
Cranking valves, running rear, sealing, cranking.
Okay. So now, here's the motor. Since we're doing this for Repair Pal, we're only told to do one head. Okay, the problem area on the left bank of the motor. We had to get a new cylinder head. They did not want us to send the head to the machine shop. What Bill and I did, I took the picture out here. But we took very light oil and brake fluid and put it on number 6 cylinder to see if anything leaked through. There was no real leak coming through. But that being said, there's a problem in that cylinder. Once you look at the valve face and seats, there's an issue on these things. Now, of course, if we go back and we know, well, that oil filter housing, the cooler, the PCV, you name it, there's problems on these 3.6 Pentastar motors, right? I mean, Dorman alone makes a bunch of great parts for these things that we've done a load of those coolers, okay, and have had no problems with them. By the way, make sure you talk it down. People who said, oh, Dorman sucks because it leaked. Well, you suck because you didn't talk it down, okay? If you talk it down, you don't have a problem. It's aluminum rather than the composite. We've had a couple of the composite ones we did that we bought right off the dealer. A few years later, they come back with the same problem. We have not had a Dorman one come back. And Dorman's not even liking me saying any of this. They don't like commercials. I'm just telling you what I do out there and my guys do out there in the bays. So it works real well, okay? New head goes on. Now we show you the difference. Look at the difference here. Your compression is up way over 150, 160 steady. Everything is even bottoms, even tops. So we fixed the misfire on this thing using non-conventional testing methods. And again, why did we pick it? It had a problem. Fred doesn't do pressure transducers. Many of you probably don't do pressure transducers. Look, guys, you know, when we first got into this business, if you're as old as I am, like I know my buddy Don there is, you know, we're up in age. We're some of the old guys that basically we had open-end wrenches and box wrenches. Then you bought a socket. Then you bought a ratchet. Then you bought a closed teeth ratchet, right? And then you had that little spinner wrench, the spanner wrench, to move quicker. Then you bought an air tool. Then you bought an electric tool. Why did you buy all those tools? They all do the same thing, but it made your job easier, right? So you need, if you're not into scopes, you're not into pressure transducers, you need to get into them, because today's vehicle is totally different, whether we're talking about an engine, whether we're speaking about a transmission issue, electrical problem. You've got to be able to magnify that to where you can find what the issue is, right? Okay, let's move on. Okay, so there we go. We're looking good. Okay, case study number 3. What do we have here? The backstory: the vehicle came in from another shop that already replaced the following: the fuel pump, the plugs, the wires, the air and gas filter, and of course the PCM. The owner complained that the vehicle ran rough on bumpy roads and coming to a stop. So where do you start your diagnosis? Now, the vehicle I'm going to show you is an example one that I did up in Rusty Savignac's shop in a class up in Massachusetts. The real vehicle I did not have pictures of because it happened years before. So I'm going to give you a little more of the backstory, but basically exact same issue. We made the problem happen here. So one of the things on the original car, remember the brain, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the hands. One of the things I noticed was when I started that car up on a cold February day, it started up good, had a high idle. The idle went down to low idle. I walked around the car. Joe from Salem Transmissions, no longer in business, a great guy, great mechanic, and good tranny guy. Joe was a really good tech, but sometimes things got a little out of hand. And look, we all make mistakes. He calls me up and says, "Hey, G, I'm leaving you the car in the back. I came back from a trip. I look at the car and I notice a couple of things. There's always, I do a walk around and look. I noticed the rug is worn. The guy who owned the car must have wore work boots. I get in the vehicle. I think Joe's nuts. Okay. He already replaced all those things, but I'm like, I don't know, the car's running good. Until I put my foot on the brake and put the Prindle in drive. Then it's running like this. I pull it up to the bay door, throw it back in park, running great. Lift the door up, foot on the brake again, run crappy, bring it inside, and I go, where am I going to start my diagnosis, right? So one of the things we did here is what I originally did, and this is a lab scope picture right here of low current and the lights barely coming on, barely coming on. Now, the original vehicle, why did I think it had something to do with fuel? Well, I'll be honest with you. I said this seems like fuel related because when I stepped on the brake, it went down and it seemed like it was sputtering for fuel. I did not get propane or anything, but the older GM, all of the relays were on the firewall. I popped the hood. I got my brake alignment depressor at the time. I had an alignment rack in Bay 11. I pushed it down, and boy, it ran crappy. I took it back off. I got my lab scope. I got my amp clamp. I zeroed the amp clamp away from the relay wire, and I want to go to 37 or 80, 30 or 87. I put it on 87. I noticed with the brake pedal not depressed, it is pulling 6 amps. And the armature is beautiful. There is not an issue with the armature, okay? I got an 8-bar pump at 6 amps. Yeah, really good, right? I depress the brake pedal. The current goes down to where it's 2 amps, and here we don't have the time base set on that scope where you can see the humps, but that's okay. All we wanted to show you there in the class was a straight line of voltage before we moved on how to set the scope up to show more time and humps. So we moved on, and one of the things I always do is I'm going to hook my power probe up to the battery, which is up front in the vehicle, and make sure I take the power probe ground wire off, put it to the tip of the probe, and make sure I hit the power, not just look that it shows me a ground disconnected, but hit the power and make sure the breaker blows. Why do I do that? What is the reason for that? Do I want to break the breaker? And if I do want the breaker to blow, why do I want it to blow? See if you could type that in there. Why do I want it to blow? And we'll get back to that. Next thing I did is consult a wiring diagram. Now, you can see here we're using a resistance box, and you can play with this yourself. We're doing this going to the ground wire that's down here. We are changing the ground, and look where the current is now, way up, okay? So that means we have less resistance, more current flow, right? Did someone give me an answer there, Doreen?
Test the tool, that the tool is working, and then the other one is the breaker blows an 8 amps.
Okay, the breaker blows and it's an 8 amp breaker. That is good. And whoever that is,
That's Mike Catawba.
Mike Catawba, good. That means I got good power and ground. If not, if it don't blow, you got to take the 2 little alligator clips and scrape in that battery better. It has to blow, and then you can reset it. Now, when we go to the wiring diagram, I look at it and go, what is the difference when I put the lights on and step on the brake? Well, I want you to look at all these loads. They have different powers coming from different places, as you can see. But one thing they all have in common is G402. That means it's a ground. So let's go over grounds for a second. G1, under the hood. G2, driver and front passenger. G3, rear passengers. G4, trunk. Now, of course, always look at a legend. That is a basic legend of 1 to 4, like this car had. So now I know it's in the trunk somewhere. And let's take a look what it tells me. It says left rear fender well. Okay. But I ain't done looking yet. Now I'm going through to go, what does the extra load have to do with this fuel pump amperage dropping, right? Well, I go through the wiring diagram, looking at everything. Look what I find near the fuel pump. G402, left rear fender well. Now, the real world, and some of you guys may not be in the real world. Here we have 3 mini ductors and torches. There's always rust and corrosion, right? So we're constantly dealing with rust. I open the trunk up, and what do I see? In the middle of the fender well, not where this is a newer version, right up here, that's where the wire was, about right there with a stall washer, and it was rusted. To check it out real quick, remember I told you I took the power probe lead, make sure it was a good ground, took it to the back, scraped it in on the bolt, scraped it in good. Now I depressed the pedal, and the amperage stayed about 6 amps. It wasn't all the way up there, but it was higher and not dropping lower. So what did that tell me? That ground is no good. I tested it and proved it. I could see it visually, right? Could see it visually. What did I do? I unbolted it. I cleaned the wire up, the little eyelet. I cleaned the little sheet metal screw up real well. I cleaned the stall washer up. I went to where the trunk rod lids, actually the rods go, the metal will stick there. I took the little whizzer, put the glasses on, cleaned it up. Okay, always safety first. You want a piece of metal in your eye, right? Been there, done that. So I had to drill a little hole, even though it's a self-starting screw. I like to drill an itsy-bitsy hole, and then I took my little snap-on 1/4-inch ratchet, the clean stall washer, the clean wire, bolted it in there, and now this thing was going to be good. In fact, I even threw a little dielectric over it because in case the guy gets moisture in his trunk, right? Now, why was it on bumpy roads? So remember I looked at and seen that the rug on the floor had, the guy must have pivoted his foot like this. He was too lazy to basically take his foot off the brake and go to the gas. Foot on the brake, he pivoted, right? So the hole in the rug, I go down and I do this with the brake pedal. The brake pedal is wiggling. I could see the brake lights coming on as I wiggle it. I go get my dikes, okay? I cut the spring to make it tight so it's not wiggling around when he goes on bumpy roads. That was one of his complaints, right? and I readjust the brake switch. The vehicle is now fixed. Not because I'm a rocket scientist or anything, right? What did I do? I made a plan and I followed the plan and came up with the diagnosis and the fix of the vehicle. So next time when a vehicle comes in your shop, you need to plan on what you're going to do. Don't always run to the toolbox, okay? There's certain things you have in your head, but we all need a plan to when that vehicle comes in, what do I do first? And again, use what God gave us, the brain, eyes, ears, nose, hands. I love saying it because we've seen stuff, we've smelt stuff, we've felt stuff, we've heard stuff. That's what you do. And of course, you always look at TSBs. Is there a TSB on it? Right? You could have a bunch of problems. You know, we had a Suburban in here for a transmission, the 8 speeds that go left and right. And one of the things, as we're test driving it after we're finished, and you got to program it, but one thing we noticed, the brake pedal wasn't all that great. And I said to Bill, hey, Bill, there's a TSB on the brake pedal. You know, the brakes sometimes have an issue. And he looks it up, and of course, there was a reflash. And if you're familiar with flashing a GM, you got to pay by VIN, and you could go back in there, which we did, no charge to the customer, no extra charge to us. We go in, program it. Now the guy's brake pedal's better, and he's going to get a whole better feeling that he not only got a rebuilt transmission with a warranty, but his brakes feel good. So he doesn't mind spending $8,000, $9,000 for the total repair on that vehicle. Okay, and we did a couple of other things besides the transmission, like valve cover gaskets, diff changes, and all that, right? So think about your plan. Fail the plan, plan to fail, right? Ben Franklin. Very important thing to remember in your head. So here, this had the ground wire down there, and a lot of new ones basically use modules, right? They use modules. Let's go to case study number 4. And here, this BMW was at the dealer for a dead battery. They sold the customer a new battery and alternator. Problem, the battery still died. She returned, they said it was a defective battery and replaced it, but she had the same issue occur again. So, sorry, I had to get a drink in there, throat got dry. Where do you start your diagnosis? Where do you look? So let's take a peek at this vehicle. At the time, this lady brought it in, never came to us, recommended by her neighbor, okay? I'm working with Bill, but I got a broken ankle at the time. I'm on crutches, so the video's a little jumpy. But let's take a look and talk about a few things as we go through it. They had done this replacement, but we got a 2012 BMW X5. We have a parasitic drawer. We're going to go look at the back of the meter. We're going to come back to this door handle over here. Let's take a look at our meter. And our meter is showing us 268, 269. That is actually 260 or so milliamps. The maximum on this
40
should be 40. And Bill is the guy who is working on this puppy. I am just taking the picture. We need a little light here. Here's the i30 amp clamp, i30S by Fluke. This has a new battery sensor end here on it and a new battery in it. So let's take a look with a thermal imager when we have that type of parasitic draw. We're actually going to look at the screen here and notice it's pretty much all blue, which is cool. If I put my fingers here, you see the difference in the color? And you can even see that the print will remain there. So let's look at the problem area on this X5. And again, there's our amperage. So we're going to be pulling quite a bit. This should light up real well. So here's this door handle. Look at that problem. So that door handle is basically causing a message to come on the display that says
increased battery drain.
Increased battery drain. Perfect. Okay, so you've seen that this BMW dealer changed their alternator, changed the battery twice. In fact, what we had offered to the customer is we took the battery out and it wouldn't charge up for beans. I mean, it really got drained down. So we deal with the BMW dealer where she brought it to, and we said, hey, we can warranty you a battery out. She said, no, I don't want any of this stuff in my car. She even wanted us to take the alternator out. It kind of talked her out of that big time because it's a pain in the neck to do besides. And you don't want anyone to spend their money they don't need to spend. But they could not figure out the proximity sensor was bad on that vehicle. Now, a couple of things here. Notice we used the meter and the I-30S clamp. So we have the clamp in the back on the battery. And what we're looking at is every 3 digits that's on the display. You don't look at the decimal. Every 3 digits, when you've seen that, we were pulling a couple of amps. Now, when you're using a scope, it's a little easier to kind of figure out. But when you're using a meter, that clamp is every 100 millivolts equals an amp, okay? So we had 2 amps. I think it said 7, like 670 milliamps or 70 milliamps, whatever the end number was. That's why her battery was going dead and killing it so bad. I think before she brought it in here, she went away for the weekend and it must have drained that battery down so much it couldn't recover. That's sometimes what happens. Now, that lady became our customer, still brings different cars. She don't have the same car anymore, but she brings her vehicle here. Why did we decide to go that route? Okay, we could have done, and what do you see a lot? There was one training company that made a 4-hour class or more out of doing voltage drop on fuses. Now, the problem with that is there's more than one fuse box on a vehicle, right? The fuses have to be an ATC, mini, maxi, or just normal, and that means you need to get your probe, your DVOM leads on both of them and hold it there steady, okay? How about the ones that don't have an ATC fuse, have a different type of setup, like some of them that are sealed, they have a little plastic top on them. You break the top, you compromise the fuse. And you're gonna do that on some of these vehicles that have 4 fuse boxes, you're gonna be there forever. You need a thermal imager. You can get a VT4 from Fluke, or you can get a lower end, and that's their lower end thermal imager. They go up to very good ones. Fleur has a very inexpensive one. Or if you want to spend big bucks, you could go to Snap-on. We have it, or the one I use there, that is a Fleur, and at the time, that unit's probably 30-something, 100+ bucks. You don't need that. That has an adjustable lens. All the other ones have a fixed lens, which are good enough to what we're going to use them for on a vehicle. So get yourself a thermal imager, because not only parasitic draw, you could do a short, you could do heater problems we do all the time. You know, heater cores clogged, one hose hot going in, the other hose not. You can see if a radiator is clogged, you can see if there's a brake problem, you can see if a condenser is working right. Do you have that 40, 50 degree change between sides? It's amazing what a thermal imager can do. So I think you should definitely get yourself one if you don't own one, okay? Let's look at case study number 5. Story on this: Ford came in with a drivability problem. 2 DTCs, 171 and 174. First of all, we all know, what are those DTCs for? Is that a rich condition or a lean condition? You can type R or L in the box. Let's see if you're still paying attention. So R or L?
L.
Okay. Good. So L is where you're at. So a lean condition. I want you to go over with me what causes a lean condition. Please type that in there and I will take a look. I have to get close. I can only see out of one eye right now. So I will take a look here. Okay, vacuum leak. I like that. Unmetered air. Okay.
Misfire.
What's that?
Misfire.
VL? Vacuum leak. Misfire. Okay.
Fuel pressure.
Fuel pressure. Yeah. What type of fuel pressure? Oh, Greg. How the hell are you, Greg?
Greg.
A Sparrow. Wow. I thought you were out of the automotive business, brother.
Dirty MAF.
Dirty math. Oh, okay. Okay. All good.
Low
All right.
pressure.
So a lot of good things there. Doing good, you. All right. Good to hear that, Greg. Super, super important that you know what causes it, right? So a vacuum leak, it's only going to be a problem at idle, right? So now let's say you take out your Snap-on, your Autel, your Launch, your Top Don, Autoland, Scientech, Joe Schmo brand, whatever. Okay. What are you going to look for besides fuel trim numbers being high? And we're going to look at those numbers in a minute. Here on the E-scan, I'll blow this up. Let's take a peek at it. So there's our lean codes. They're hard codes. And here's our fuel trim numbers. We are at a plus 17 on one side, plus 16 on the other. But this is generic OBD2. If you go into specific OBD2, meaning for this car, happens to be a Ford, what are you looking for? And you guys that watch me all the time should get this right without a problem. You see the fuel trim numbers, you're only going to have one of these numbers show up. And what do you think I'm going to be looking for that could help me diagnose, is this a vacuum leak or is this a fuel pump issue? But it will not tell me if it's a load sensor problem. And I'll get into that in a second. So let's see what you guys come up with. Okay, that O2 could be a problem as well. So that's good stuff there. Well, Barrow should always be checked, but it's one reading. And by the way, if Barrow's off, very good, Greg. If Barrow's off, your timing and fuel delivery will be off. So Barrow is super important. And by the way, you may not get a code for Barrow because here I'm at 300 feet above sea level. I could go upstate New York, or let's say I drive out to Colorado and it's 5,000 feet plus in Denver over a mile high. I'm not going to get a Barrow code. Barrow changes based on pressure. But if the pressure is off and the reading is skewed, you may think you have a particular problem or may not have a problem because you're code dependent. Do not become code dependent. You may not get a code. Always know what your barometric pressure is. Here we're roughly 29. So people are still just saying math. All right, I want to ask you this question because no one came up with it. Do you guys ever see fuel trim cell number? And you better write that down because it's that damn important. Fuel trim cell number. Now I know my buddy Greg there was a good GM guy. And Greg, you could answer this real simple. In the old days of integrator block learn, what was the number of the vehicle running great? The good number at idle, what was that number of integrator block learn? Type that in for everyone. Or anyone else could type it in. Yes, 128. So 128 is on a scale of 256 counts. 0 is count as a digit, and 255 was the max. You really never seen it go way up there, right? But it could. And you never seen it go way down there, but you could. I mean, I've come across some cars years ago, went down to the 40-ish or went up to 150 or so. Okay, that means they're way out of whack. Now, that being said, they always had something called fuel trim cell number. There are all those 256 cells, and if you have a FRC car and you do EFI Live or you have HP tuners, you know what I'm talking about. You're going to have that fuel map that you're going to try to adjust to make your car have the right amount of fuel at the right load with the right timing, right? And if you get what I call the Automotive Bible, the Bosch Automotive Handbook, version 11, get that at sae.org, Bosch Automotive Handbook. You can read everything in there from fuel trim to electric motors to gas, diesel engine, hydraulic brakes, you name it, it's in a book. It's a hard read, but it's good stuff. I keep it around when I am writing articles or doing something technical. Now, that being said, fuel trim number is important, but you get one fuel trim number on all of those tools, Snap-on, right? You'll get it on Launch, you'll get it on Autel, Top-Down, Autoland, Scientech, every tool, OE tools. But that only tells me if the number is low, and I'm going to go over this real quick in the next screenshot here. Now, if the number is only at the bottom, and we're not talking about the rest of this yet, if it's only at the bottom of the load, okay, RPM and absolute throttle, but General Motors made this whole setup years ago, and most of the time you use 0 to 16 cells. Not saying you can't use more, those are the most common cells that are used. Now, 0 to 6, I want you to write that down, is going to be idle problems. So right down here, if this was all high numbers and the rest of this was all green, you have a vacuum leak on that bank. If over here, this is all green, but up here is only red at the top, well, you don't have a vacuum leak on that bank, you got a fuel delivery leak on that bank. Maybe the injectors are clogged, the rail is clogged, right? Not all that common, but I've seen it over the years. So always look at fuel trim cell number. When you get about 12 to 15, okay, or 16, that's going to be fuel delivery. So up top here, 12 to 15, fuel delivery. One thing you cannot get unless you're using EFI Live or HP tuners, which is a little more difficult to use, or eScan. eScan here, Bernie did not go with the load sensor because I have a question for you. How many times has a load sensor failed compared to, and a load sensor, map and mass air, as you know, but compared to throttle position or APP? Come on, I haven't changed the throttle position or APP in years. I can't remember the last one we changed here. Why? Those do not fail as much. Yes, the days of putting the EGR valve next to it, General Morons did that. Yeah, they used to go. Big deal, right? GM learned their mistake and moved it away, okay? So they don't go much. So as a scan tool manufacturer, of course, my buddy Scott Brown says, hey, your buddy Bernie, next time you speak to him, tell him it's really the load sensor. So I said, yeah, but they fail a lot. I'll ask him. And you know what Bernie said? They fail a lot, and we don't want to send someone down the wrong path. So we're going to leave the load sensor out and use the absolute throttle or throttle position, APP. That makes sense. We have a couple of comments? Okay, let me see. On eScan, numbers were bad at idle, got better, high RPM. Was a vacuum leak, okay. Paid for AC on and off mapping, adaptive fuel viewer, yeah. So, when you look at something like this, oh, Josh Weaver, hey Josh. He's normally on with me, but he's in Michigan. Lucky Josh, I guess. And by the way, don't miss, he has one great class coming up at the TST big event. If you haven't seen this guy do his own stuff, he's an upcoming rising star. Come out and check him out. He kicks ass, does a great job. All right, so when we got from bottom to the top here, of course my clicker just went nutty, there we go. From the bottom to the top, these are pretty damn high numbers, right? What you're gonna have here is a mass airflow sensor issue. Guaranteed it's gonna be a load problem. To back that up, my next step would be what? I'm gonna see if we can go in there and see if we could reach. The yellow is the actual and the red is where we should be. We're falling short of that, aren't we? And you all know 1 gram per liter, yeah. If you don't own this, you would use calculated load, right? And calculated load, we would like at sea level, and again, you would have to see where you're at, 90% of calculated load when you go pedal to the metal, about a good car length is the best thing to do, okay? Now here on the E-scan, it takes into consideration what your temperature is at. You're here 300 feet above sea level here. It's a 5 liter, it was 41 degrees out. You have to utilize that information to make it as exact as possible what the problem is. But, excuse me, like I said before, whatever tools you own, I don't care what those tools are. You need to invest in things that are going to make your job a lot easier, okay? If you make your job a lot easier, you'll diagnose and fix cars quicker. And it's having that diagnostic mindset, right? Not being in a box, thinking out of the box. And, you know, when Bernie and Neil put this thing together, Bernie actually came up with the scan tool in my kitchen. No lie. And I told him, you're crazy. Who needs another generic OBD2 tool unless you put some neat stuff in there? And if you've ever met Bernie, you know he's a rocket scientist. He built this thing to help us diagnose and fix cars quicker. So we have 2 dongles here in the shop. You can put the software on loads of different tablets or laptops or computers and use it. Many people, myself, Josh, Pete Meyer, and Ken Zanders on the road teaching, and there's a lot of E-scan stuff in there because it comes out of my shop. And Josh uses it, some of his case studies, and Kenny, okay? And when people see it, they go, what in the world is this? We're not here to sell you an E-scan. I'm here to make your job easier so you can make more money tomorrow and diagnose a car quicker. That's what we're here for, okay? So, case study number 6. Oh, getting close here. I babble on, okay? So here is a Benz 324 Matic. No start when the engine's hot, no DTCs, so where do you start your diagnosis? Now, in the old days, what comes to mind is you got a module problem. Well, they don't use a module. It comes from the computer. So now if you are TFI, if you read the frickin' information, how the system works, it's an AC crank sensor. A signal has to go to the computer. It has to reach at least 2.5 volts, positive peak and negative peak, okay? If it doesn't reach it, it is under the threshold of making that thing start. Now, when someone tells me it's hot, and only some of you older guys out there are going to have a choke tester. Yes, a choke tester. I date myself. For carbureted cars, right? Air goes in it. One side will burn your hand or put a piece of paper on fire. The other side will freeze it, right? So we go in there with a choke tester, and this thing is buried in the firewall. You look at the AC voltage. I back probed this thing myself. When it came to changing it, I'm going to be honest with you. I had Bill do it because I was in good shape back then, but I'd have to lean over this fender for a long period of time and stick my arm all the way down. And that's why you pay employees, I guess. Kind of nasty of me, but I'm just telling you the truth. I said, Bill, you could do it. You're younger than me. So I made him go down there after I back probed it. So I back probed it, and we only have 1 volt positive peak, 1 volt negative peak. No DTC. See, people would go, well, you had to have a DTC. No DTCs. Intermittent problem. The guy, again, you know, sounds like a broken record, but he did go to the dealer. He went to another shop, and one of his neighbors recommended him here. You're only as good as the last vehicle you diagnose and fix, right? Now, hey, have we had some problems with vehicles? Yeah. And one that I'm going to tell you a story, I haven't even written an article on it yet or put in a class, but I'm going to tell you about this BMW Alpina we had in. Weirdest damn thing. This was to at least 3-4 shops. The guy is Bill's barber. He brings his other cars here, but for some reason, he didn't bring this one here, I guess prior to him cutting Bill's hair or something or another. And this thing wasn't running. He says to Bill, hey, you think I should tow it over? Bill tells him it's going to be $275, to diagnose it, and would probably need a couple of hours if it sounds that bad. Well, here's where you lose your pants, right? And remember, every one of you knows something I don't know or the other person don't know. No one knows everything, right? So he starts diagnosing this vehicle, and he notices this is a square wave crank sensor, unlike this Mercedes, and it is not a high voltage that goes to ground. It's a ground and goes up, a pull-up type of circuit. 2 DMEs on the vehicle, one on the left side of the vehicle, one on the right. Of course, 2 mass airflow sensors, all that good junk. And the problem is the left DME and crank sensor goes all the way down to ground and comes up to 5 volts. The one on the right side, it has at least about 1.5 volts off ground, okay? So now, as a good tech, Bill uses his brains, and he gets a good ground wire, and he grounds it to the crank sensor signal, no difference. He back probes it at the computer, ground, no difference. Every wire checked out exact from the left DME to the right DME. No difference except for one wire that had that voltage drop. And again, you would think that that drop would be cured if you put a ground on it, right? Well, no such luck. Now, Bill called Opus. I always say you should have the Opus IVS. What a great tool. In fact, they're one of our sponsors, be at the TST big event. Great tool. We love it. Bill uses it all the time. The rest of the guys use it. Very good. It's not the greatest scan tool per se. It's the tech support you get behind it. Now, being on the road, Bill runs this by me, and I go, run the ground. He said, I did. It didn't do anything. Looks at a wiring diagram. He said, I put the ground where the ground should be. Nothing happened. Call up, there's this one guy, Brian Matthews. He's a genius of a BMW guy, works for Opus. I know him. I was just with him out there in Seattle when we were both teaching out there. And he just told me, I said, why doesn't a ground pull that ground down? He says, don't know. But he told us what the problem was. The valve covers were taken off. They got little castle nuts on it. Bill looks at the right side, cleans them all up, checks them. Remember, every ground checked out good. Goes to the left side. The castle nuts were a little beaten up. Cleans all the grounds up. We order some new castle nuts for him. Puts it on. Ground comes all the way down. Car starts, no problem. What the hey? Some of those cars you get what the hey, right? It's that difficult, but someone knows something you don't know. And I asked them, well, how in the hell does BMW wiring work where if you put a ground to it, it doesn't work? And of course, our buddy Pierre, who was Mr. BMW for years, he was lost on it as well. And there's a guy who worked on BMWs, I don't know, a gazillion years, and he couldn't come up with it. So when you reach out to people and you find out, hey, this is the fix for it, a silver bullet, but I'd love to know what in the world prevented it from pulling it down to ground. Those little castle nuts, and how does that fit in a wiring diagram? We could not find out yet. Maybe you know something, you can tell me. Anyway, back to this. We heat it up, nothing. We cool it, it started to come up and the vehicle started. You heat it, would die right out. We put a new crank sensor in. Look at our peak voltage. About a good 3.5 high, 3.5 negative. No DTCs, we fixed the vehicle. So we've gone through 6 different case studies, and I want to go over this. Hopefully you guys pick something up. If you think it was good, please type the letter Y in. If you think it was a waste of your time and I suck, you could put the letter S in there. How's that? Okay. But I want to thank you for coming out, especially last minute, and I want to talk about Dorman training offers for a minute. Dorman, we do the lunch and learn. Yesterday, my buddy Swede did the heavy duty one. These things will be up on the ATS website and at some point on the Dorman training website as well. We have paid for webinars. They're usually 2 hours long for $40. We have a great subscription plan. The subscription plans, you basically check them out. You can pay so much a month or I think a year. And if you get the gold membership, you get everything we get at have for a viewing until you don't pay for it, I guess. And you get discounts on other stuff, including our training event coming up in September in PA, one coming up with Ratchet Wrench and Motor Age out in Arizona, and we're going to be doing some in Michigan and other places with Motor Age. Seminars that we do all over, not only for different parts stores, but sometimes just a seminar we'll do in different areas of the country. Hands-on training. You can get, like Josh was down in Georgia, I was in Indiana. We could come to your shop and do the training, even if you're a fleet or not. You can contact me for all that. And the hands-on training that you can come here and other places as well. And in-shop training, we come to you. So go to dormantrainingcenter.com and you can check all that out. If you have any questions, we would entertain them now, and there is the QR code. And for you guys there that answered a couple of right questions, and Greg, why don't you give me a buzz after this is over? Call me. You got my number. And I want to thank you all for coming out. Do you like this? Should I do a part 2 sometime in the future? Not next month. I'll come up with something else. Do you like it? Do you think this was helpful for you? Please let me know, or if you want to see something different. I thought the last minute, last night at about 12:30.
Hang on, you didn't give us the answer to cranking and running on the pressure transducer.
Oh, thank you. So cranking is for engine sealing. See, I get wrapped up in some crazy stuff in my head. Cranking is for engine sealing, so are the rings and the taper right. Running is for volumetric efficiency. So every race car, they do running compression. How much can we get in and how much we can get out? Any other questions? Thank you for reminding me I'm a dummy, right?
Yeah, they all want part 2.
You want part 2. Anything else you would like to see? You know, I've been doing this for years. So I got to come up, you know, and my boss thinks, oh, you'll just come up with that. He doesn't realize, you know, I don't want to repeat stuff, but I want a learning lesson where someone gets some information out of it. Again, that's my goal, and Dorman Training goal is to make you the best you can be. You know, these free ones are great. Thank you again, you know, to Dorman Training. That is real good. During the pandemic, when we started all this stuff, helped a lot of people out. So you could come see Dorman at the TST big event this coming Saturday, March 29th, Terrytown, New York. And for you couple of guys there that answer questions right, Catawba, you can get in touch with us. And I think there was someone else. Was I right or no? Okay, maybe just Catawba. All right, well, hey, thank you guys from New York. And I got to get back to work. I am G. Trulia. Thank you so much again for coming out. It makes me feel good when you guys and gals give me the feedback and find it useful. That makes it all worth it. Thank you again. Have a great day. See you next month. Hopefully I'll get the date out quicker to you than the last minute. Have a great day.